The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some tips when you go to install a suction side cleaner, including regulating it and which cleaner to pick for a particular pool. Pool Service Pro, open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. A lot of times you may be new to a suction side cleaner and installing it. Usually the manual is pretty straightforward. I have a lot of install videos on my YouTube channel for most of the major suction side cleaners. It's not really that hard to set up, but there is some fine tuning involved in a lot of cases. And if you don't fine tune it correctly, you're not going to be able to set up the cleaner properly and it's not going to clean the pool properly. I think back in the old days, the Pentair Creepy Crawly, the old version, and then their new Cruiser were the two hardest cleaners to set up. Believe it or not, the Creepy Crawly would a lot of times have too much suction, and this would cause a problem with it moving too fast in the pool, and then it would kind of tip up backwards and not really touch the ground all the time. So the disc would be lifting up off the ground, it wouldn't clean effectively, and you sometimes would have weird cleaning patterns in the pool. So they were pretty tough to set up, and I would say that the newer cleaners are much easier to set up. You don't have a lot of the same kind of problems with too much suction. Sometimes you will, but a lot of times you won't, and they're pretty basic to set up. So there are two areas to connect the cleaner at, and some of the older pools there may be a third option, which is kind of weird. There may be a suction port right under the skimmer that you can connect the cleaner to. This is pretty rare, and I've only seen it in a few pools, and then you would need to do a few things at the pool to get it working. So I'll leave that off because it's not really critical. It's usually going to be the skimmer or the side port. The side port is a dedicated cleaner port that was put in when the pool was built, and there should be a Jandy valve over there controlling it, so you can regulate the side port from the suction from the side port and the skimmer. They're connected together and they go into the pump, and so one controls the side port and this one controls the skimmer. Basically, by turning the side port on and off will regulate the skimmer suction down because you're creating some suction at the side port. It's not really complicated, but just be aware that those are the two locations where you're going to connect your suction cleaner, either at a dedicated cleaner side port or into the skimmer. Now, some skimmers may have one or two holes in there. The skimmers with the one hole are older, and there's a diverter valve that's usually in there that you're going to use to move the suction from the main drain to the skimmer. The skimmers with two holes, they're pretty easy to operate, and they usually have what's called a float valve diverter on top. You have to remove that if you're connecting the cleaner at the skimmer. Usually when the builder puts in the pool, and it's a newer pool with the float valve diverter, it's like a UFO device in the skimmer, and it's like a white kind of UFO looking thing really, and you put it in there. It's funny because I had a customer that was like quizzing me when I was starting his pool. He was like, "Hey, what is that white UFO thing there?" Like he was trying to trip me up, so I didn't know what was what. And I said, "Oh, that's the float valve diverter. That's a safety feature of your pool, so that when the water gets low in the pool, it'll actually turn the skimmer off and suck from the main drain. You can also set it to regulate some suction from the main drain as well as the skimmer." He was like, "Oh, okay." But I knew he was testing me, but I think I passed. But you usually have that pool built with a side port valve. On rare occasions, the builder will put that in without putting a dedicated cleaner side port, and then you're going to have to remove that in order to connect the suction cleaner. Typically, those pools have an autofill, so it's not really a big deal. And then the suction cleaner will, of course, create some safety because it's taking the water from the bottom of the pool. And if the water does get low in the pool, you'll probably notice it before it affects the pump, or the customer should notice it before it affects the pump and causes any kind of problems. But that has to be removed if you're going to connect at the skimmer. Typically, the one-hole skimmers again have a diverter valve. Sometimes they're threaded in, sometimes they're not. And this causes some problems also. When you have the cleaner connected there, the diverter valve may move with the cleaner, causing you to lose suction. So there's some things you can do. What I like to do is kind of rig up something right next to there, maybe a rock or something. Usually I would pick a rock bigger than the skimmer opening in case there was a failure, something were to happen. You can also use a locking bar. Pentair makes a locking bar that you can use to kind of lock the hose in so the diverter valve doesn't move in the one-hole skimmers. So the locking bar for the Creepy Crawly is called the Pentair K12076 VAC plus 2 locking bar. Again, that's the Pentair K12076 VAC plus 2 locking bar. And this was for the vac lock. When you connect it there, it would keep it from moving. It works highly effectively also in those one-hole skimmers with a diverter that's not threaded, and it should keep the pool hose in one position if you put it in correctly. It's also great for those pools where sometimes you'll turn off the pump and water will come back into the skimmer and then pop the cleaner out of the skimmer. This happens in some cases where air gets in there. Sometimes finding the air source is difficult. Sometimes it's just one of those things where you just can't eliminate it. I had a pool that was 1,000 feet away from, the equipment was like 1,000 feet away from the pool, literally. So there was always air getting in there because it just was pulling it so far. So there was always air coming back into the system. And you may have this problem where the pool turns off and then the cleaner hose pops out. This locking bar will keep the cleaner hose from doing that. I mean, you can add like rocks to the top of the cleaner or bricks and the hose, and that'll stop it too. But the locking bar is highly effective. It's super expensive. I don't know why it's about $35 on Amazon. So it used to be like a $10 part. And this is something that's highly effective in keeping that from happening. Now, sometimes you'll have this actually happen at the side port too. And, the vac lock is something that you're going to need for the side port installation. So let me switch over to that real quick. So the side port is just threaded. And if it's a new pool, usually there's no vac lock included. So the vac lock is a device that threads into the side. And then there's like a little snapping top, of course, and this prevents entrapment. So let's say you have a cleaner connected at the side port with the vac lock. You have a pool party and someone's swimming, and they kind of knock the cleaner hose out. That vac lock will close, and making sure that no one gets entrapped there on the side of the pool, because the suction can be quite strong. And if a little kid puts his hand in there, it may get stuck in there. So that's why the vac lock is a great safety tool. Now, if the top of it snaps off, which is very common, it's not going to hold the hose in properly. There's like a little notch on there that's made to hold it in. Now, if you have a MX cleaner, the Zodiac cleaners with the locking hoses, you're going to have a little bit of a problem with the side port connection because it's not really made to go into the side port the same way as the other cleaner hoses. There's a plastic elbow adapter. If you have the Zodiac Atlas or Max, you know what I'm talking about. So there's an elbow adapter that goes in there, and you really can't put the vac lock onto that elbow adapter because it doesn't have any ridges, like the hoses have ridges, and that's how it works. So the way to solve that, of course, is to get the Zodiac connector hose adapter. It's called the X77094, X77094, and this is a regular pool hose, universal pool hose, like a 4-inch section of it with a male end, and then you have the locking hose connector on the other end of it. It's really a cool device because I use these on all of the locking hoses with the side port because you can stick the male end of that hose in there or the adapter in there, and then you can put the locking hoses on the other end of it, and then you can clip the vac lock onto the ridges in that hose section. In fact, Zodiac should include this with all of their cleaners. I had mentioned to them that this part is essential. The little elbow they have doesn't work effectively. They should get rid of that and put this in the box for everyone with a side port so that they can actually utilize the vac lock on that hose. I know I'm spending some time on this, but this is something that you're going to run into out there with the Zodiac locking hoses. So the side port needs to have the vac lock. Sometimes they come in the box, sometimes they don't. I believe Hayward has those in all the boxes with their cleaners, and sometimes you have to buy one aftermarket, but it won't work effectively without one. So make sure you have that. I know the old Creepy Crawly had something that threaded into the wall, but it wasn't effective in holding the hoses on. So this is much more effective. And speaking of Creepy Crawly, you may have an old account where they have this weird skimmer lid in there with the creepy crawly, I remove those if you can. Sometimes you have to pull them out with a channel lock so they're good. And just use a regular skimmer adapter with the creepy crawly. When you install the cleaner, the hose length is really important. Usually most cleaners operate with the concept that you would have one hose with the cleaner head sticking out at the furthest point of the pool. This gives it time to turn around in certain areas, and so it's not going to tip over on its side. A lot of times, if you're having trouble with your Hayward Aquanaut or Phoenix cleaner, it's because there's not enough hose sections in the pool. So when it gets to the deep end or corner, it can't really turn out of there without turning on its side and falling on its side. So a good solution is to add 1 or 2 hose sections if the cleaner is turning over on its side. In most cases, having 2 little hose sections will cause that problem. So when you put the cleaner in, let's say you're connecting it at the side port, make sure you stretch it across the pool, and at the furthest point, you want to have 1 full hose section coming onto the deck with the cleaner head on the deck. And that's usually enough hose to get the cleaner around the pool with no problem. And the same goes for connecting at the skimmer. Sometimes you'll need extra hoses if you have a 40-foot pool and the skimmer's on one end and there's only 36 feet of hose in there. You may have to purchase 1 or 2 hose sections. Fortunately, most pool pros have like 100 hoses in their backyard. So I've never actually had to have a customer purchase a hose section for their cleaner. I've always had extra hoses I just put on there. Because when I take out their old cleaner, I save the hoses and I can repurpose them. It may not sometimes be pretty because you may have like a gray hose coming into the skimmer, but it's effective and it's just something that I do for my customers. I just add hoses when necessary. Let me talk a little bit about the regulator valves in the skimmer. I think the best regulator valve created was the Hayward V094P. It's the white connector with the little blue dial. Now, of course, some leaf debris gets inside that little blue dial area and would cause the cleaner to accelerate, but you can clean that out very easily. You just unscrew it and make sure you don't drop the spring into the skimmer, and then you would simply readjust it. I find this the best connector because it's easy to regulate the cleaner suction. You have that blue dial and you can open it up to, increase the skimmer suction and then reduce it down to increase the cleaner suction. And I find this to be the most effective one. Now, Zodiac, of course, has the flow keeper valve that comes with the cleaner. I think, it's designed to be self-regulating, but I really have trouble sometimes with pools with 1.5 horsepower pumps, getting that regulated down. So I just take the flow keeper valve and I sell them or keep them in my desk here in my garage. I have a desk full of all these parts, a dresser, I should say, full of all these parts. And then I replace it with the Hayward V094P, which I have a lot of them because when you install a Hayward cleaner, a lot of times you're putting them in the side port. And then you would keep all the skimmer adapters, and I would repurpose those with cleaners that had maybe the flow keeper valve. And Pentair has a pretty good one with the 41200 0213. They sell that on some of their cleaners, but I find that it interferes a little bit with my hole-in-one basket because it sticks up a little bit too high. And I prefer the Hayward one anyway. I just like the fact that it really has an easy way to control the flow. And to me, they're just the best design regulator valve on the market today over the Zodiac Flow Keeper and the Pentair one. I think the Creepy Crawly, the old one, had the worst one. It was that white self-regulating thing that didn't work because it never self-regulated. And I would replace those every day of the week with the Hayward one. And again, I've never actually had to buy an adapter for a customer because when I put in a Hayward pool cleaner, Aquanaut, or Phoenix, most of the time it's at a side port. I just keep that regulator valve to use on other pools that have, other valves that come with it. And I think that the flow keeper valve to me is one of the worst because it doesn't really self-regulate well. And then the Pentair one is just as bad, except for the new version. And I did mention it does interfere a little bit with the hole-in-one basket. The hole-in-one basket is a basket I designed that actually has a hole, not in the direct center, but off to the back. And you can use this to, when you remove the skimmer basket, you'll have to, when you actually put in a cleaner in the skimmer, I should say, you have to remove the skimmer basket, and a lot of debris will go through the regulator valve. I mentioned that the little blue dial fills up with leaves. The Zodiac Flow Keeper will suck in leaf debris also, and then invariably the pump basket gets clogged up with debris. So the hole-in basket is just a skimmer basket with a hole in it, And the reason why it's good is because if you do have a party and you remove the cleaner and you want to use your pool, I think you have your basket still intact without the hole in the bottom you can put in there, remove the hole-in-one basket in your cleaner, and then you're set. But with the hole-in-one basket in there, you can keep the debris from going into the skimmer regulator valve, and it's just a great way to prevent debris from getting into the pump basket. And I think if you wanted to purchase one, just go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the homepage, scroll down to the very bottom, and you'll see the link to purchase the hole-in-one basket. A little commercial there for what I think is a great product, and I definitely would recommend getting it if you have the cleaner connected at the skimmer. One problem you're going to run into with the cleaner is if you have too much suction. Sometimes this happens where you have a 2 horsepower pump. Even the skimmer regulator valve can't regulate the suction down enough, and you just have way too much suction. I've even installed the regulators before where I mentioned the Halo one with the blue dial. I had a pool that had so much suction that I would just unscrew the blue dial all the way and remove that piece entirely, and it would still work okay because the suction was pretty tremendous. But what you can do is double stack these regulator valves, and I do this all the time when I run into a pool with too much suction. You just put one on top of the other with a hose connector, and then you have a dual regulator. For instance, if you have a Jandy flow keeper and the cleaner is just bouncing around like crazy, you have maybe a G3 or a Zodiac Ranger, and you have that one fully adjusted, simply get a hose connector for the top, and then put the Hayward one on top of there and connect the cleaner hose to that. And now you have 2 ways to regulate the suction at the skimmer, and I find this to be highly effective, and this is a way to reduce the suction at the skimmer if you have something that's too powerful. I always recommend turning off the main drain when you have an automatic cleaner connected to the skimmer, just to give it more power and also to prevent it from getting caught on the main drain. A lot of times if the main drain is on, the cleaner may get hung up on there. A lot of times the cleaner will get hung up in the main drain regardless, especially the anti-vortex ones. And so I'll switch gears slightly and talk about cleaner choices for the pool. And I think a lot of times if you do have an anti-vortex main drain, you're going to have a hard time with most cleaners, the Hayward Navigator, the Hayward Pool Cleaner. Most of the bouncing type cleaners will eventually get stuck on there, especially if the main drain is just gigantic, which those are usually. And I think the best cleaner with the anti-vortex main drain is the Zodiac MX8 Elite or the new Polaris, which is Zodiac's version of that updated. The Atlas or the Max. Max is sold at Leslie's. The Atlas you can buy at your supplier. And I think these cleaners, just because they have such a wide cleaning profile or cleaning track, or they're just big, and so they don't get stuck on the anti-vortex main drains like the smaller cleaners would. And this would be my choice if your pool had one of those. Now, if you have a vinyl or fiberglass pool, I would really recommend the bouncing type cleaner. You can get a Zodiac Ranger, you can get a Zodiac Wahoo, you can get a Zodiac G3. If you wanted to, you can put a Creepy Crawly in there. That's not a problem. It's just going to be pretty loud with the fiberglass pool. And the vinyl pool, it'll work pretty good also. So the bouncing cleaners are my preference. I mean, you can probably get one of those generic cleaners also and throw it in there. They probably would work perfectly fine for the vinyl and fiberglass pool. But I do prefer the name brand cleaner, and they do come with the regulator valve if you need it. A lot of times the in-ground vinyl pools will thankfully have a suction port, so that's good. And for the in-ground cement gunite pool or quartz pool or PebbleTech pool, however you want to refer to it as, I would say a gear type cleaner would be the best. They get out of the corners and the step area much easier than the bouncing type cleaners. And for me, I think the Hayward Pool Cleaner is one of the best gear type cleaner. I already mentioned the Zodiac MX8 Elite, and then the Atlas, and then the Max Cleaner. These are also great. They're geared, and they'll get to a point, and they'll turn and pivot. Same thing with the Pentair Rebel and the Hayward Navigator Pool Vac. That's an old gear type cleaner. The Great White from Pentair is also a geared cleaner. The Sand Shark. So these all have gears in it, and it'll turn away from a corner or step area very easily and won't get stuck anywhere. You'll find that the bouncing type cleaners in an in-ground gunite or PebbleTech pool would tend to get to the step area and not be able to turn out of the step area effectively. Now, there was a device they sold many years ago that was really effective in the first generation. I believe the company was sold to someone else, and they're not quite as good, but they still work somewhat effectively. Originally, it was called the Pool Twister. Now it's sold and manufactured by AquaQuip. It's called the AquaQuip TW1 100. And you put this on a pool hose with one of the bouncing type cleaners, and has gears in there. So there you go with the gear stuff. And so it kind of converts your bouncing cleaner to a geared cleaner because it'll slightly twist the hoses as the cleaner is moving. And so if you find that it gets stuck in the step area, this may get it out. Like I mentioned, the original version I thought was better. Maybe it's just my imagination, but this may work effectively. It's kind of got mixed reviews, but you can try it if you have that problem. My best solution, though, if you have a bouncing cleaner that gets stuck in the corner or the step areas, is to replace it with a geared type cleaner. You'll never have that problem in most cases with a geared cleaner getting stuck anywhere, and it has the built-in gears that will turn it, unlike the twister device that has it in the device itself, but you'll find it much more effective. There's a few things that you should be aware of also when you have the cleaner connected to the side port. Sometimes the skimmer will actually pull the hose in because, the side port is set up near the skimmer, and I've had this happen on several accounts where when the water gets a little bit low, the skimmer will pull the hose in, causing the pump to stop and then start again, and it's kind of like a vicious cycle. And one solution, of course, is to keep extra water in the pool. So if there's an autofill, you can adjust it higher, and that'll keep the cleaner hose from getting sucked into the skimmer. Another effective method is to put a floater in front of the skimmer, a trichlor floater. You could tie it to the skimmer, even if you don't use trichlor tablets. If you have a salt pool, tying the trichlor floater to the front of the skimmer to where it's kind of blocking the skimmer opening, the hoses will kind of bounce off of that floater and carry on its merry way with no problems. But I find that having something in front of the skimmer is the best way to prevent that hose from being sucked in. And the last resort would be to not use the side port, but use the skimmer to connect the hose to if you're having a problem and that's not solving it, or if raising the water is not solving it, then I would forego the side port entirely and connect that cleaner at the skimmer. And since I just about covered everything in this podcast, I'll cover a couple more things. The two skimmers at one pool with no side port. How do you connect the cleaner there? Hopefully there's some kind of regulator valve, or Jandy valve I should say, that will control one skimmer so you can reduce the suction. Sometimes there's nothing there, and you may just have to put the pool hose directly in to the skimmer to give it enough suction. Sometimes the regulator valve won't give it enough suction. I've had success with a threaded plug where I drilled holes on top to reduce one skimmer suction down. You can also use the Pentair regulator valve. It's the GW9500. The GW95 part number 41200-0213, 41200-0123. So it's the skimmer regulator valve. You get the cone, you put it in there, and then you can put a cap on top that comes with it, and then you can adjust it with the black knob on one skimmer. I know it's kind of complicated sometimes with two skimmers if there's no regulator for each one, so that you might run into also. So a lot of time connecting the cleaner to a pool with two skimmers is a difficult task, but it can be done, and I've done it successfully before. They're just not designed to have a cleaner connected basically, because they have the two skimmers, and the builder, pretty much thinks that it's going to pick up all the debris. And one last thing, you can't really put a suction cleaner in a pool with the pop-ups on the bottom. If there's a caretaker and there are the pop-ups on the bottom where they have the return, the suction cleaner is not going to work in there. If you did want a cleaner in a pool like that, if you're having problems where it's not working, where it's not popping up and pushing the debris to the main drain, you can of course get away with the robotic pool cleaner and run it in there when the pop-ups aren't working. But those pools aren't designed for a suction side cleaner unless there's some way to turn off those and have the return going back normally. Most of the time they don't have that option. So the suction cleaner is you can't put one in a pool like that. And you can certainly go from a pressure cleaner to a suction cleaner very easily. If you have a pressure cleaner, you don't like how it's operating, you could of course just put the suction cleaner in the skimmer, connect it there, or at the plumbing, at the equipment. If you look at it carefully, you can actually convert the dedicated pressure line to a suction line. We have to call a pool professional in to look at your equipment, and they can make the determination if it's possible to convert over your dedicated pressure line for the pressure cleaner into a side port suction line by connecting that to the suction side of your pool in front of the pump. All these things can be done. It just takes a professional look at things. And the more experience you have with suction cleaners, the more you're going to be able to do little tricks out there to get them operating correctly, especially in pools that are kind of different and strange and weird. Like I mentioned, the pools with gigantic skimmer holes. You can actually put a cleaner in there. You're just going to have to go down like 5 feet to get it connected. So the more you put cleaners in, the better you're going to get at installing them, and you're going to become an expert in no time. If you are looking for other podcasts I recorded, you can go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On there, on the banner, click on the podcast icon, and then it'll take you to a drop-down menu of close to 1,300 podcasts. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguidecoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Real quick, if you're not using pool service software, try Skimmer free for 30 days at getskimmer.com/poolguy. Again, that's getskimmer.com/poolguy. Skimmer, everything you need to run your pool service business all in one app. Pool Service Pro, open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.